Welcome everyone to another episode of Keto Chat. I am your host, Carole Freeman, certified nutritionist and creator of the Fast Track to Keto Success program. Today, I'm really excited to be chatting more with Dan Pardi. We met back at PaleoFX 2017, and I found out he is really into sleep and stuff. So that's one of the areas we're going to explore on this talk. But also, he's a really awesome guy involved in a whole bunch of different stuff. And so, Dan, for people that don't know who you are, tell us who are you?
Yeah, Carol, thanks for having me on. Well, I am somebody who's just totally geeked on health in general. I have been my whole life, and over time, I have spent my time and efforts to pursue understanding health from an academic perspective. I have a master's in exercise physiology. I went back later in my career and actually pursued a PhD, which I am close to finishing, and that's in cognitive neuroscience, looking at the effects of sleep deprivation on eating behavior.
Oh,
And
that's
so,
so awesome.
no, it's really interesting stuff. And earlier in my career, I did diet research, diet and cancer research with Dr. Dean Ornish for about a year, which was really interesting work. We had 180 prostate cancer patients come once a week for a 7-hour intervention. So imagine that many people in a big room, and they went and spent time with got stress management counseling, dietary advice, met with an exercise physiologist. And then at the end, we had a big community meal, so it was a very special research protocol. And that made an impression on me about, are there ways that we can translate science, which is always evolving, always, pushing the boundaries of what we know, but then translate that so that people can benefit from that knowledge faster than what the typical process is, which can take decades sometimes. So that sort of stayed in my mind. And I worked in the pharmaceutical industry for about a decade in something called medical affairs. Medical affairs does scientific support on products once they are approved by the FDA. So I ran a research grant program and scientific publications for the company. And in that role, I had the opportunity to interact with the top sleep researchers around the world, quite literally, because the company that I work for, Jazz Pharmaceuticals, had a drug for narcolepsy. And narcolepsy is a fascinating disorder. They're missing a protein in their brain that doesn't allow them to consolidate wakefulness into, like we can. So we wake up in the morning, might have a little dip in the afternoon where we feel sleepy, but then generally we're going to maintain that wakefulness up until bedtime. And then we sleep for 8 hours or something like that. Well, narcoleptics, they sleep more like a cat. So they are going to be up for a few hours, then they have to sleep for about an hour or two. Then they're going to be up for a few hours. And that is all around missing that protein. And so we had a very unique drug that has a very rich history that actually helped them sleep more deeply, which then helped them elongate their sleep time and have less sleepiness during the day. And so anyhow, that's where my love, anything that relates to health is fascinating to me, but this is where my love for sleep really blossomed, and where I had a really good opportunity to investigate it more deeply, to learn about, it's a great window into how the body works in general. And I'm really glad to be sort of still doing research in it and still creating public health tools that help people sleep better and do other things related to health better too.
Yeah. So I'm curious if you have a really interesting story of how you got interested in health at a young age. Did you have like some really sick family members? Did you have your own healing crisis, or was it just something you're born with? Or
That's a really good question. For me, I played soccer and basketball growing up, and I was really passionate about both of them. I got injured. Somebody had driven their truck across a field, and it made inroads into the soccer field, and I twisted my ankle and pretty bad. And so I started to pay attention to my body differently at that point, right? Until your body stops working sort of perfectly, then you just can move through life as though nothing bad's ever going to happen to you. But once that happened, I was like, okay, I need to get back onto the playing field because it's really frustrating. And the sad reality is even though I enjoyed my high school sports career, I did kept getting injured in that same spot. So it became weak. But anyhow, that led to, again, a bit more of a focus on my body and how to heal it, which then became more of an interest in how the body works in general, which then led to career questions. Do I want to become, a athletic training coach? Do I want to become a scientist? And as I pursued my master's in exercise science, basically there are those two different tracks. You can, on one side, you can become a really good trainer, somebody that works with different groups of people and helps them get better in whatever, way you want to say better is, whatever for that group. For me, though, the other side of it was really investigating sort of the basic science side of how the body changes under dynamic conditions. Or let's say if you're exercising, but you're doing it in a very hot environment or a cold environment, or just exercise in itself. So a better name for exercise physiology is probably dynamic physiology. How does our physiology change when we challenge it in different ways? And in particular, I started to look at how the body will regulate body fat storage, the mechanisms and the systems involved. And it's very robust and complex, but it was really interesting to me. Also because I was an obese kid, even though I was athletic, I was an obese kid, and I had obesity, in my family, very profound, morbid obesity. And so, to me, that was another issue I was always trying to solve in the back of my head. What are some techniques? What are the systems involved in regulating body fat? What are techniques that are sort of meant to help, make that situation better? And and so that interest has sustained really across my life, and it's such a major need that we have nowadays. With the rise since the 80s of obesity, it's really at an epidemic level. And so, I'm really, and then the other thing that I do, which I'll mention, so not only am I remain a scientist, but when I was doing cancer research with Dr. Ornish, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And I was looking at, of course, at lifestyle approaches to ameliorate or slow down or improve the situation in some way. So I would work with my father, and I would talk to him about what I learned and what I know, and he would listen proudly, and then he wouldn't change his behavior at all. And anybody who works in health knows it's hard to change the behavior of a family member because they just don't see you that way, even though they might respect you, but it's just hard. But when he passed away, I thought, okay, this was a really stark reminder that it's not enough for you to know information or for information to be known in the world. Where somebody benefits is when they can pick up that good piece of information and use it to their own benefit. And that became really my mission, is how do we help people benefit from the world's best health information and health technology? Because otherwise, the best thing you can do is just take a pill, right? It's got to be so simple and frictionless that it's a matter of just putting it in your mouth and drinking some water. And still, we know that compliance rates for drug, adherence are terrible too. So my whole personal mission now is how do we make people expert at their own health so that they can benefit from what's known? And I think we're going to see this divergence take place in our world, where we're going to, see very, very sick people as the environment around us changes in a manner that, promotes a default condition where we are eating the wrong food, not getting enough exercise, we're getting the wrong amount and timing of light in our 24-hour period. All these things that created a strange, both external environment and then an internal environment that lead to inflammation, that leads to disease. We know that. At the same time, though, those that are willing to become expert, or at least seek expertise, I think that's really sort of the goal, is that that's how you're viewing your approach to being healthy. I want to become really good at this. I think we're going to see actually extraordinary levels of health in our world because we have more knowledge than we ever had. And we also have really powerful technology that can help us intervene. But I have a saying that no technology will be healthy for you, right? No app or tech is going to take your soul cycle class or your CrossFit class for you. But technology can help you be better at being healthy yourself. Whether it's your Fitbit, right? Whether it's whatever it is, that is the potential, in my opinion, of what technology can do. And so that is, then I created a behavior model. The behavior model is meant to say, how do we as health facilitators help somebody adopt and sustain health long term? And that was just released earlier this month, and it's called Human OS. So I took the behavior model and I turned that into an application that people can benefit from. And I've been working on it for years, and I'm really excited that it's now live.
Oh, cool. So yeah, we'll link that down below. So humanos.me is what your URL is for that, right? So
that's right.
Cool. I'll have to check that out. Gosh, first of all, I'm so sorry to hear of the passing of your father. I just acknowledge that.
Yeah, thank you.
And taking a tragedy like that and then making that something that inspires you to help heal other people is really remarkable. And, it's a lot of what inspires a lot of people to get out there and help other people is like, okay, I got to make sense of what happened, and so here's what I can do for that. So congratulations and thank you for taking that as an inspiration to do that. And
No, thank you for acknowledging that, saying that. Now, I mean, he died when he was 59. It was about 13, 14 years ago now. But one of the reasons why I love what I do is because I get to think about him regularly, because, turning that tragic situation of a wonderful guy dying too early, and, not having, he never got to meet my wife and my son, and I mean, all these things that he missed out because, cancer's tough, but he certainly had a lifestyle that didn't help him. Not that he worked very, very hard. I think he had undiagnosed sleep apnea, and he would drink 20 cups of coffee a day just to stay alert, and he didn't have a great amount of balance in his life. And it's so easy for that to happen in your world. You get focused on wanting to do really well in your life, at your career, and next thing you know, your pattern of living is completely dictated by these forces that create a very unnatural pattern. And then the results, you're playing a game of roulette. And so another big objective of mine is, how do we weave really good knowledge and skills and behaviors into the practical fabric of life, as I call it, right? Like, one solution is give up everything you have and just move out and, live in the woods under natural conditions. And, maybe a person is going to do that, but it's not a solution for most of us. So what we need to do is operate under the right knowledge. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the model, because it's informative about how the tool does what it does. But the model says, in order for somebody to adopt and sustain health behaviors long term, they need to understand why they're doing something, how to do it, if they're doing it, and if it's working. So if we deconstruct that a little bit more, the why is oftentimes where we put too much emphasis, right? So you educate somebody, and then if they're not doing what they've been taught, then you need to give them more information. Now, you just keep lobbing information provisions at people until they, you beat them down with info until they change. And we know that information does matter, right? Because that will help to set the compass, at least. What's the direction that your compass is pointed in, right? Do you think saturated fat is good or bad? Is cholesterol something that you should be modifying your diet around? And the endless amount of questions that are going to help you find a direction. And because health truly is complex and confusing, then not having clarity on a subject is can be really problematic too. So we can learn the wrong information, we can not have clarity on something, or we can actually find something, be clear on it. And I talk about information as both fresh, familiar, or fluent, right? So fresh is like, I've never heard that before, that's interesting. Familiar is, yeah, I have heard that before, but I really don't know it very well enough to talk about it. And fluent is really what we're trying to get you to. So the point where you know something well enough where you can have a conversation with a friend about that info. And when you're at that level, then you can exploit that information for your benefit. And so for Human OS, we're actually making peer-reviewed health courses on various topics that relate to health. So for example, one on fasting, one on the Mediterranean diet. And it's remarkable when you learn something the right way, and our whole system is designed to promote fluency, then you can really exploit that information for the rest of your life. And that's exciting, right?
Yeah.
So then there's, do you have skills to take that piece of knowledge and actually weave it into your life? And, it's sort of like, I know what riding a bike is, but can I do it myself, right? There's an analogy. But once people develop skills, whether it's cooking skills, etc., then it's a little bit more about, hey, Katie, it's a little bit more about, making it simple for somebody. So we all have busy lives. So can you simplify somebody's, what I call daily health practice, which is the efforts that they're trying to, I want to be healthy and I'm going to be making efforts. Can you make that easier? So that's part of the goal. So once you develop the skill, can you make it easier? And then, am I doing it? You might say, okay, I fully appreciate the value of doing this and I know how to do it, but gosh darn, life gets in the way. And I read that book 4 months ago and now I'm just back to the same patterns that I was before. And that's where I think the benefit of all sorts of quantified self-tracking technology, the power of them is that they help with what I call the mundane but meaningful, right? The stuff that you recognize, it's good for you, but it just gets pushed to the side in the busyness of life. And so if you can trigger action, if you can remind people, if you can help people set goals, you can remind them of their performance and nudge them at the right time where they can do something about it. Really powerful stuff. Now, on its own, it's often not enough, right? So if you give somebody a self-tracking device and they're not sure if it's a, is it a bad exercise tracker or is it a good step counter? And do steps even matter? And how does this fit into my overall physical activity practice and my overall health practice? But if you can help somebody understand the value of these, then all of a sudden the fact that it has a little friction of charging the device every couple of days, that's usually where people stop using a device that they bought. And the attrition rates of people that buy these devices and stop using them is very high. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that people might buy them without a lot of knowledge of their utility. And if they're never really taught about it, then it just goes into the desk drawer. And this thing that could really help you doesn't. So that's really frustrating to me. But so now you can see, like, the knowledge isn't enough, just the tracking isn't enough. And that's how I think of it, is we live in this sort of very fractured society where there's lots of helpful stuff out there, but it's not brought together into this helpful ecosystem where you learn, you develop skills, you have a way to interact, you're getting reminded of your own pattern. And so the whole goal with what we do is to say, how can we make you smarter at what's known in the world and smarter about yourself and your patterns? And then have that, it's not something that you do in a week, but it's something that you interact with regularly, and it makes you better over time. So every year you just get more knowledgeable and better at knowing you and doing you. And I think that gives health the adequate respect that it really needs in order for us to cultivate these extraordinary health outcomes that we all want. And one of an outcome we can look at as something that happens much farther downstream, but it can also be maintaining leanness and cognitive performance today. So if you want to perform well at that meeting tomorrow, then you can, then how you live, how you've been living is going to influence that. So that's what I like to focus on, is sort of the here and now. But that's a synthesis of, what we do and why we do it. And I'm pretty proud that we came up with a sophisticated explanation of why we built what we have. And so, and then upon that, we're going to try to address all sorts of different issues, whether it's weight loss, better aging, good parenting, good, meaning like, oh, I want to get pregnant. What should I be eating? How should I be exercising at CrossFit? Like all those sort of questions. To I am pregnant, to I have young children, what do I do? And then disease orientation. So I have prediabetes, or I have diabetes in my family and I want to avoid it, or I have diabetes itself, to heart disease and mental, brain issues. So all that is, I think, if you have this common set of tools that are powerful, you can help people with different interests and needs. And that's our objective.
Nice. Yeah. It sounds really, really awesome. I can't wait to dive in and take a look at what you got going on. And
oh, cool. Thanks, Carole. Yeah.
But I get the sense that this is kind of, a lot of the conferences that I've been going to is we're coming into a time where, the whole N of one, right? Like people are figuring out what works for them, which is probably going to be different than what works for, their friends and family. And so what have you found personally? You shared that you have family history and your own personal history of being overweight and obese. What have you found that works for you? What's your personal, diet approach and lifestyle approach? Like, what are some of the foundations of what you found is essential for you to be healthy?
Yeah. So I had been athletic my whole life. So I've always been physically active, but, I'll start with diet. So I eat a combination of paleo and Mediterranean, which means that some nights I eat Mediterranean, some nights I eat paleo. And it's just like both of those fall within where I set my compass for how I want to eat. I do ketosis for about 6 weeks, a few times a year to go into ketosis. And I also will fast. So actually, probably next week or the week after, I'll do my first full 5-day fast. And I'm looking forward to that, but I'll do intermittent fasting as well. And I didn't know much about fasting, honestly, until recently, but we did create a course on it and I learned a ton. So what I'll do is I'll work with people that are published in the space, and then we will create the course together, and then we'll have it peer reviewed by an academic to ensure that the quality's high. But very fascinating subject. So I think, the title of it is this the missing piece of our health practice? And it might be, actually. One of them. So that is my diet for general. I let's see. For sleep, of course, that's what I talk about a lot. Even though my interest is in everything, I do talk about sleep quite a bit, just because of my background. That is interesting because while the science of sleep is as robust and as fascinating as any other area, the guidance is quite simple. If what are the determinants of good sleep? Timing, intensity, and duration. And so I will pay attention to when I get in bed. I will be modifying my light environment. You also want to have smart light rhythms day, evening, and night. So I try to get at least a half an hour of outside time per day. I typically take phone calls. I'll walk from my office to outside and be in the bright light. That will help to anchor your circadian rhythm, which is the timing of your biology.
Can I ask real quick about that?
Sure.
Like being by a window with outside light, does that count, or does it actually need to be like physically outside?
Yeah, it's better. It's better being by a window than not.
Yeah.
Not as good as being outside. So, yeah, but we spend 90% of our time indoors now. Think about that.
Yeah.
And the amount of photons in a dimly lit room that are entering into the eye, if you measure it in what's called lux units, is somewhere between like 1,000 to maybe 5,000 lux. If you step outside, it's orders of magnitude greater. It's over 100,000 lux. So a lux is the intensity of photons that are concentrated and coming into the eye and giving your brain a much more powerful signal that it is indeed day. And when you spend, as most of us do, a lot of the time inside, and then you have artificial light sources at night, whether it's from high definition televisions or e-screens, whatever it is, bathroom light, then it's more likely that that light at night is going to cause your circadian rhythms to drift. And that's going to cause alertness issues the next day. It's going to mess up your physiology. You're putting yourself in a state of perpetual jet lag. And we recognize what jet lag feels like if you've ever done any travel across time zones. But that makes us feel sleepy, but all of your body's feeling sleepy too. So the way that, when we function really, really well, we have a very robust circadian rhythm. And that means that the timing of our body processes are well synchronized. And it is a common state now that we don't really sleep in an environment like that. And we're not living in an environment that is nurturing our circadian rhythms very well, is what I mean to say.
Right.
So I pay very close attention to that. I will wear glasses that filter blue light a few hours before bed. A lot of people do that now. I'll use f.lux on my computer. And all those things really matter. In fact, the Nobel Prize for physiology and medicine on Monday was won by people that have done their work in circadian biology.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's an extraordinarily important topic. And essentially what they found is they discovered the gene period, which they named period. Period produces a protein called PER. And over the course of the night, that gene is active and it produces a lot of this PER protein. And then during the day, the fact that when PER protein builds up to a certain amount, it inhibits the gene from producing any more PER. But then as the day goes on, the PER protein is metabolized and broken down. And then the result of this sort of, seesaw relationship from day and night activates or deactivates other genes and processes that then will let the body know it's light, it's dark. What should I do? Should I be having to go to the bathroom every 20 minutes, every hour or so during the middle of the night? No, that's not what you want, right? Should I be really hungry in the middle of the night? Should I be seeking food, right? So it times our behavior, our physiology, cell cycle, growth and repair processes. All of those things are on basically a clock. And the timing of that clock is really critical to health. In fact, it's not something that is talked about enough. And I do talk about it quite a bit, but we'll increasingly understand the value. That'll increasingly seep into the health, dialogue, which is good. Sort of like the microbiota is new. Circadian rhythms are extraordinarily powerful part of our health. And they were a part of no health equation 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then for physical activity, I created something that is on Human OS, but it's called Intune training, and it stands for Integrative and Opportunistic Training. So first of all, I do try to walk 10,000 steps a day. So I wear a pedometer, I wear a Fitbit, and it measures my steps. And for me, that's a marker of low intensity physical activity. And by virtue of wearing it, it means that I'm more likely to get up and pace while I'm on the phone. It's more likely that I'm going to weave walks into my day when I can. And so I have to let that device, I have to empower it with value for it. So for my behavior to change, it's not going to do it for me, as I was talking about earlier, but I let it. I say, okay, here's my goal and I'm going to work at it. It doesn't mean, yesterday I was frustrated. I woke up and I saw that I had 9,600 steps. So I didn't get my goal. But generally, when I look back at patterns over the last couple of years, I average between 10,000 and 11,000 steps. That is my pattern. So I'm very pleased with that. Now, for higher intensity work, Intune training is something that I developed, and it's actually quite unique. So, as I mentioned, it stands for integrative and opportunistic training. And so the idea is that you're integrating movement into your day, and you do it not in a planned schedule, but you do it when the opportunity strikes. So let's say we finish this conversation and you stop hitting record and you do some body weight squats, right? And you just work reps into your day. So the actual language of Intune says you have until day's end to complete. And then there are a few exercises that are body weight oriented, and you can just chip away at them. You can do them all at once if you wanted to, if that just worked for your day. Or you can do a few reps here, a few reps there. And there's a lot of thinking that's gone into it. But pretty much in all of the papers that I've read, I always note a comment in the discussion that says something to the effect of, yes, while this level of physical activity was achieved, extra benefits seem to occur when that activity was spread throughout the day versus done alone. Additionally, I'm very interested in what is going to augment cognitive performance, and I've written about this, and I can include a couple links for you. So how exercise can make you think better now, and then how chronic exercise helps with memory formation, and essentially creates this fertilizer in the brain that helps keep the brain strong. And but yeah, so muscular activity during the day is something that I actually will try to seek. And it's funny because I don't stand all day, but I have a standing desk. But then I'll do, I'll go and I'll do some of my Intune here and there, and I'll just keep track of my reps. And then there's times where I'm laying on my back on my couch, doing work on my phone. And so I am always changing my position, and I'm not in one position for, ever more than an hour. And actually that way, I think that is actually the healthiest than just being in any one position all day long. So I've been doing Intune for quite a while now, and another benefit of it is that because every workout is not very intense, there's not a lot of work, the workload is not very high, that I don't feel exhausted by my workouts. I actually feel energized by them. So every day I wake up, if I'm doing them regularly, which I do, I feel energized by my workout, not exhausted by it. And then doing the workout in the day is energizing as well and enhances cognition. And then I'm also physically active every day. So even if I don't finish my workout, I chip away at reps here and there. And so instead of having a pattern where I'm active on the weekends and I'm not active during the week, or I'm active just 3 out of 7 days, I'm active almost every day. And if you think about a more natural pattern of hunter-gatherers, et cetera, then yeah, there's days of rest, and so I'll get those as well. But I let those happen organically versus being planned. And another interesting point is that Dan Buettner, who looked at the 30 longest lived societies around the earth and said, what are patterns? What do they do? So places like Ikaria and places like Okinawa, Loma Linda, Nicoya, Costa Rica, all these places where people live 2 or beyond 100 with greater frequency than other places around the world. None of them exercise as we think of it, but they all have physical activity as a part of how they live, right? And so I think our performance orientation in our world, where we're always having to run faster, lift more, do better. So this is all of our physical activity mentality is oriented towards performance and athletic performance. And I think that actually does a disservice to thinking about physical activity for quality of life and health and better aging. And that to me is what my priority is. So, yeah.
It always strikes me as really funny in our society where people will pay somebody to come and do their yard work, or pay them to build a fence for them, or, this physical labor things they'll pay somebody to do, but then they'll drive a mile to the gym and they'll pay for, this artificial physical activity environment that they could get a lot of around their own house and would save them money as well.
Yeah, totally. And actually, that's another thing I'll mention is one of the best things about Intune is when you're always looking for opportunities to move, which is different than, all right, I got to put on a certain outfit. I've got to go drive to the gym, right? You you essentially take physical activity outside of this very restricted confines. And by the way, I'm not opposed to going to the gym, and I'll do that once or twice a week. I'll go do a soul cycle class or something that I enjoy, get out of the house. So I still like that, but I'm not waiting for that opportunity. You know, I'm also making today healthy as well. And I actually do that more for other reasons, which is social. I'll meet up with some friends. You know, I will sure, I think that the activity is good, is healthy too. But uh, the other thing too that as to sort of harken off of what you were just saying about, you know, yard work, et cetera, you now seek opportunities to move throughout your life, right? In the mind, your mindset changes, and that is probably the most profound difference. And if you think about what really matters with physical activity is not the fact that you ran your fastest mile time, let's say in 2007, right? But it's rather is what has your pattern been from 2007 on a daily basis and now of the last 10 years, right? That is what is going to determine the efficacy of physical activity as a contributing factor in your overall health is your regular pattern. And so while I don't have issue with people pursuing fitness, I also don't think that it's often that necessary to do these, you know, extreme pursuits. And a lot of people think that that is what's needed. Yeah. So I really like, you know, the fact that this is body weight oriented, that I can do it anywhere, that, you know, every day is a little bit different. Some days I wake up and I just do all of it in the morning because that's what works for my day. Some days I just don't have the energy until later in the day, and then I feel okay, and I whip out the reps, and it just leads to a much more stable physical activity practice. So while I do try to get my 10,000 steps a day, that's one thing that I do. It's daily. For physical activity, I think of it more of as a weekly goal, but then I still try to make every day a bit active.
Do you have any like meditation, stress management, relaxation practices part of one of your pillars of health?
You know, I mean, for me, walking actually is probably my big sort of stress management. I really try to stay on top of it. I don't meditate, although I look forward to diving into that at some point in the future. I recognize that benefits have been described, and a lot of people attribute, you know, really important benefits to a regular meditation practice. But generally, there's two types of stress. There's controlled and uncontrolled stress. So uncontrolled is you have like this jerk boss, or you have a chronic condition that's really difficult to control, and so you feel like it's outside of your control. And the best thing you can then try to do is manage your response to it, right? Because your own response to a stressful situation can exacerbate things. Mm-hmm. Then on top of that, you do have the controlled stress. How well are you able to manage yourself in the moment when, you know, you have things that could be potentially stressful? And that has a lot to do with your attitude. It has a lot to do with self-regulation. And so if I'm, for example, sitting here and working and I'm just feeling some friction, or things are really, you know, I've got a lot of work happening. Like, for example, a couple weeks ago, I had one of the more stressful periods in my life because I was launching Human OS, which I've been working on for years. 2 days later, that was on Monday we launched. 2 days later, I gave a 90-minute seminar at the Mayfield Fund On Conference to the heads of Kaiser and Sutter Health, and all these big health organizations were there, and people that were chief of marketing officer at Facebook. It was really like a very influential crowd, and it was the first time I was giving that talk. So if I'd given it 1,000 times, it's one thing, but this is the first time. And then that night I flew out, and I flew to Seattle to go to the AHS, and I gave a talk on the evolution of sleep, and that was the first time I gave that talk. And so it was a lot of work in a very condensed period of time. And it was really stressful. But what did I do? I made sure that I keep eating well. I sort of hyper-focused on all the stuff that I know matters to help me sleep well, to help me, basically maintain the health of my body so that I could withstand the stress of, you know, the reality that I was dealing with. So let me turn my phone off. Hold on. Sorry. Yeah, so that's and what would I do? I'd work for a little bit, then I'd go for a walk and I'd get some sunshine, and I would just give myself some time to think and process. And I would, and that's that sort of relationship, checking in. How am I doing? How do I feel? What do I need? And listening to your body. That's, by the way, going back to Intune, that's the other thing I really like about it, is it's coaching you to be in tune with your body. So not only is it integrative and opportunistic, but it's also be in tune with your body. When do I feel like doing it? How do I feel like just going for a really hard workout and getting it all done at one, or do I want to just do a few reps at a time? And that relationship, I think, is also really critical to having a health practice that sustains itself long term.
Yeah.
Trusting yourself, knowing that you're not going to beat yourself up, and giving yourself what you need. And if you can make physical activity something that always makes you feel better versus something that is somewhat punishing, then yeah, go hard when you're feeling like, when your body's telling you, and that feels good. But if you don't have the energy to do that, and you think of, well, high intensity training is the only thing that I can do, it's my only option in my head, then what happens is your pattern changes and it becomes less frequent part of your life. So, that's my general approach to pretty much everything in terms of health. Like, have a relationship that helps me enjoy it so that I keep doing it, and it's more the pattern of how I live.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. Now, let's switch gears just a little bit and dive into the sleep topic a little bit. And, kind of the first question that I think of is just like, well, what is sleep anyways?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's been a big question for a long time. We used to think it was a period of quiescence where everything, the brain and the body, would just shut down. And we now know that it is a very active process where there are parts of the brain that are more active during sleep than any other time during the day. But generally, it is a period of rest. And in my talk at AHS, I talked about the origin of sleep itself, and we usually think of sleep as a process that's taking place with the whole organism, but it's generally being orchestrated in the brain. And is there particular centers? Are there particular substances that are driving it? Well, the centers, if we look across species, they look very different, but the chemicals involved in sleep actually tend to be somewhat overlapping, quite, highly homologous, so very, very much overlap. And essentially, the neurons have a way to, as they are communicating and transmitting to another neuron, ATP is released. It's a part of the process of energy, is this energy currency. And cells have a way to keep track, neurons have a way to keep track of how much energy has been spent so far in the day. And because of that, then when enough of that energy byproduct, adenosine, will accumulate, that will then trigger other immune molecules to be produced. So interleukins, tumor necrosis factor, and all of these will start to then create a state which make it harder for neurons to fire, and it basically will facilitate the process of sleep. And you could actually look and some work that was done by a guy Kruger up in Seattle, or in Washington State, excuse me. He was able to reconstruct a neural network in a petri dish and could induce it to go to sleep. If he kept that neural network up longer, it would have rebound sleep, which would mean it would sleep longer once it did have the chance to sleep, just like we do. He was able to then take that same petri dish, and when it was totally awake, bathe it in the same chemicals that usually accumulate as it's thinking. But if he just bathed it with tumor necrosis factor, it would cause it to go to sleep immediately. And so what is going on with the sleep process? Well, we know that it is probably the result of the neuron's ability to connect with other neurons, and that's called plasticity. And so we're not basically born into the world only with the sort of pre-programmed neural networks from previous generations and the experiences that they had, but rather the ability for neurons to connect with one group or another group. So connect, disconnect, and reconnect. And that plasticity enables us to then have experiences in our life and adjust to them and put ourselves in a continually optimal environment and situation, which is really fascinating. And sleep is hypothesized to have developed out of this need to create a stable place for neurons to be able to connect, interconnect, and reconnect. And that plasticity does take place highly during sleep process, particularly during REM. We will undergo something called neural replay, where you're thinking the brain is firing in these very unique patterns similar to the firing patterns that were experienced during the daytime. And you're doing a transformation of memories that enter into an area of the brain called the hippocampus, and then are getting put into neural networks during the process of sleep. That's long-term memory that happen at night. And so that enables us to learn, to essentially become better at, by the experience that we've had in our life, we become theoretically better by learning to sort of withstand based off of knowledge that's, stuff that's happened to us and knowledge that we've accumulated. Now, it doesn't always necessarily look like that, but that's sort of the process. And the other thing that takes place is that those byproducts that accumulate during sleep are also purged. And so when you don't purge them, then you have an accumulation of these protein aggregates in the brain, which can then lead to things like Alzheimer's disease. So so it's a lot of it is energy regulation. A lot of it is stability for neural networks to help with learning. And really, there's no part of the body that goes untouched during sleep, or what I say, if you're not getting adequate sleep, then, all parts of the body are at risk. And what breaks for you, is going to be individual to you. But yeah, sleep is a fundamental part of the healthy functioning of a human body and other bodies as well that are non-human.
Yeah. So how does sleep affect our appetite?
Yeah, well, profoundly, both from a metabolic hormonal level. We know that certain hormones that are involved in energy regulation and food consumption, like ghrelin and leptin, will alter in a manner that will make us want to eat more. We also know that it will affect how the brain is processing food that is available in our environment. So we have alterations in aversive processing, which is whether or not something is like something that we dislike. We have alterations in hedonic processing, which is, I see something that I really enjoy. How you process that will be altered. There's alterations in emotional or affective processing. So overall, this can lead to very strange types of decisions. But what my work looked at, what happens when you get ecologically relevant amounts of sleep loss, which means instead of giving somebody, one full night of no sleep, which a lot of studies will do that, what happens if you just miss an hour or two? How does that change aspects of cognition and non-cognitive processes? So things like reaction time and motivation, and then cognitive processing, which is how much of this should I eat? So my study, what I found is that, and I was looking mostly at alertness, so subjective alertness and objective. So objective alertness is reaction time. How quickly can you react to something in your environment? Subjective alertness is how sleepy do you feel, essentially. And what I found is that there's actually a difference between those two. So if you were subjectively sleepy, you are more likely to eat foods that you recognize as low health. And if you were objectively sleepy, you are more likely to, out of all the calories that you consumed in my protocol, you're much more likely to eat high energy dense foods. And so yeah, the two in combination are going to basically create an environment where you are just much more likely to say yes to the donut that you like, but you also don't want to eat. And that's something called effort discounting. So in very profound ways, probably most of them controlled by neural mechanisms, how we make over 200 eating decisions a day. And some of those are conscious, many of them are subconscious. We see any sort of food in our environment and we're making a decision about whether we want it or not in that moment. Even if it doesn't feel like a decision. And our responsivity to all of those food cues changes whenever we aren't getting the sleep that we need. So it's a big, big deal. We know that the correlation between sleep loss and obesity is very consistent. So if you look at epidemiological literature, people that are getting less sleep than they need will have a pretty drastically increased risk of being obese, 55% increased risk. And now we're still unveiling the mechanisms, but all the different, as a researcher, Hans-Rudi Berthaud said in a talk at the Society for Neuroscience in 2004, we always remember this, that the systems involved in eating are robust and redundant. And that there's so many different systems involved in the body. And they're also doing a lot of different things. And so eating is not just one center and one chemical, but many. And actually, I'm sure we haven't identified all of them, but sleep seems to act on quite a few of them.
Yeah, it's really, really fascinating. And I'm sure people have experienced that, whether conscious or unconscious, that, a night of not enough sleep and how they're just hungrier the next day. And I'm curious, actually, I don't know if you have any ideas on this about like what might have been, from an evolutionary standpoint, like why is it that if we got less sleep, our body wants to eat more? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. There's only hypotheses, but uh, most mechanisms in the body favor energy efficiency. Efficiency always sounds like a good word, but in this case,
Hmm. It
it
means
means
fat.
yeah, exactly. It means holding on to calories. And so under stressful situations, a common stress response might mean, well, if it's stressful, then maybe that was often correlated with periods of energy unavailability.
Okay.
And so if you are perceiving stress, it might automatically become a signal of, okay, hold on. And we know from a hormonal perspective that actually can be the case as well. And so you end up developing insulin resistance at fat tissue, and and other areas of the body as well. And so it's the mechanisms in place generally sort of make you more hungry, so sort of make hay when the sun's shining,
Hmm.
and store more. So that's the main thinking around what the connection is.
Yeah, that makes sense. And perhaps the body thought, well, we're going to get to catch up on sleep soon, hopefully. And so let's store some more fat so we can survive that longer sleep period, perhaps.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, totally.
do you have a sense of like, what percentage of the population is just in this chronic sleep deprived state? Like you said, just an hour or two less than what is optimal really makes a big difference.
Yeah, it depends on the study that you cite, but the National Sleep Foundation recommends that we all need 7 to 9 hours of time in bed per night. 50 million to 70 million Americans have a sleep disorder. Most of it is insomnia or obstructive sleep apnea. Many people will undergo regular or periodic involuntary or voluntary sleep curtailment, which means that they're just staying up later to work or watch a show.
Hmm.
And that's really where the opportunity lies for us to do better. Is I often educate people to get in touch with what good sleep feels like by making it your top priority for 3 weeks,
Mm.
and do everything you can to try to get the best sleep. So modify your lights, go to bed early, and just get really good sleep for a few weeks, because you can't judge sleep off of one night.
Mm.
Then once you get in touch with that feeling, that is basically your source of motivation to say, okay, I want to stay in that condition more regularly. And when you're in that condition, then you want to associate it with all the things that you care to do well. So if you can do that, then that's going to be a big benefit. Yeah. So because then you have to be the one that's making the decisions in your life to make sleep the priority, to not watch one more episode of the show,
Yeah.
to think about it, basically, to think about, okay, sleep matters. What do we need to do to get the sleep that I need? When should I stop eating? When should I? There's a lot of decisions to be made, but that's basically I think the situation that we have in front of us. We have to appreciate it enough where you're thinking about it. You have to have tools in place that are going to then remind you and keep you motivated and give you feedback about how you're doing towards your goals. You need to think about if those goals indeed are reflective of what you feel, what's optimal. And so all that matters, but it's really worth it. It's really worth it when you can get the sleep that you want. And as much as I talk about it and understand this stuff, it's still a struggle. It's always a
Mhm.
struggle.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, all of you listening to this right now, Dan's challenging you to a 3-week sleep priority challenge. And so embark on that and then comment below and tell us how that went, what your challenges were, how that went for you. But that's great. 3 weeks sleep challenge. That's got to be a thing now.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well, so just in wrapping all this up, was there anything else that you were hoping I would ask you about or that you wanted to share?
I would say not quite, but I'd say go to Human OS. You know what I'm going to encourage everybody to do? There's a course that I made. So one of the things that we do is, right, so we have courses, we've got recipes and workouts, we've got tracking. I would say go to Human OS and watch the 25-minute Road of Health course that I put together. All the courses are broken down into short lessons that are like 1 to 3 minutes long. So you can
Okay.
watch a little bit here, watch a little bit there. That is the thesis of why the tool that we built is what's needed in our world. And the whole point of it is not to say this is exactly what you need to do to be healthy, but rather to put you in the right frame of mind to address your health practice or the things that you do to try to be healthy, whether it's reading labels, going to the gym, whatever all those willful efforts are that you make. We want to make that as effective as possible for the rest of your life. And one of the first things is being in the right frame of mind to capitalize on things that can help you in the right and treat those, correctly and benefit from them. So I'd say that's the one parting thing is go watch that. And even if you use Human OS after that, I think, or not, it's gonna, I think just sort of putting that in your mind, getting sort of educated on that concept is going to be really valuable.
Yeah, really, really cool. So we'll have a link down below to your website there for people to go and check that out. And
Awesome.
so I've just got one final question for you to wrap this up in a nice tight bow is,
Yeah.
we just got word the meteor's coming to Earth. We're all going to get wiped out today. It's
Mm.
your final day on Earth. What's going to be your final meal?
Probably an apple fritter.
Homemade, or you got a special bakery that you like it from, or?
Oh man, I used to. Oh boy, actually, I don't know. Probably maybe an ice cream sundae. I go back to Blue Plate in the Mission in San Francisco. They had homemade creme fraiche ice cream, homemade fudge, 24-hour slow roasted raspberries, and like almond slivers. And it was the best tasting thing I've ever had in my entire life.
You're just gonna go out in a glucose coma, aren't you?
Totally. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Dan, thank you so much for being here and sharing all this information. And I'm sure we could just keep talking for days about all the information. You're a super smart guy, and I just really I thank you so much for taking the time to let me talk to you and get some more information out there. And I wish you all the best and all the endeavors. I know you've got tons of stuff you're working on all at the same time. And so thanks for being here. If you guys like this interview, give a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more. We've got lots of links down there in the show notes for you to check out all the stuff that Dan's up to. And but that's all for now. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching.